Hello, poison friends. We are back for a regular episode. I've got Erin here with me.
Hey,
How's it been going?
it's going.
It's going. Yeah, it's been one of those weeks where it's like kind of like dragging through mud, just trying to get through it.
Yep.
And like anytime you feel like you get a reprieve, like
You get
something
slammed with
something
something else.
happens. And it's
Mhm.
like, oh my God. But we're here. We survived. And hopefully this next week will be a little bit easier on us.
Hopefully.
Please. But it's been a wild few weeks over here just trying to get like household stuff taken care of because we've been out of town and then
Yeah.
I've had kids in my house like every day. So it's like,
Can't catch a break.
oh my God. Like my house is a hot mess right now. So, but my notes I hope are good. We were talking about Johnson & Johnson a little more today, but before we get on to that, just want to remind you guys about the Patreon. We have we have the free thing you can join for free as a member and just kind of hang out in there with us. We also have the $1 tier where you can totally jump in on the Discord, and there's lots of really cool fun conversations we have on there, anywhere from like sharing pictures of your pets. And sometimes, we just get on there and vent about stuff, whether it's to do with news stuff. There's lots of poison in the news type stuff that we talk about on here too sometimes. And but there's also just general catching up and meeting other patrons that are here with us. We also have a whole section for neurodivergent stuff, whether it's autism, ADHD, OCD, PTSD, lots of different stuff on there. I mean, Tourette's is a neurodivergence. There's more than just a couple. We typically mostly talk about autism, ADHD, those few, just because that's what my personal experience is with. I don't like to talk about things that I don't have as much personal experience with.
Right.
But it would be cool to have like someone that does have personal experience with those others. Like maybe
Yeah.
we could have them on as like guests one day, see like how just what their experience is.
Mhm.
Because I think it helps
have a chat.
Yeah, kind of
Yeah.
helps to know like what they go through personally and how that compares, right?
Mhm.
So that'd be interesting to see what we can do about that in the future. I do also want to mention our $3 tiers. There's like two of them. I didn't do that like on purpose. It's kind of a
Accident.
they're the same thing. It's just Patreon was a little weird when I walked back my $5 tier to $3, and it was like, nah, you can't just push them together. But basically, with those, you get everything from the $1 tier. That includes bonus episodes too. So we got some bonus episodes that we do every week. But you also get shouted out here on the podcast between those $1 tiers and up. And for the $3 tier, you do get also some extra bonus episodes, including the Neuromix chat and Poison in the News. That's once a month with me and Adam. Last week, for our regular bonus episode for like everybody, like $1 and up, like we did a bonus episode. It was a week before last week. See, my time is all messed up right now. It was a week before last week. We did a review of this documentary where it was like The Liver King. I let Adam pick the documentary.
Oh boy.
It was wild. It was
Oh goodness.
not, something I usually watch. I like a good documentary, but it was kind of crazy. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
And I made sure to put, some disclaimers for all the language that was in that particular documentary that we watched, the episode. So
Yeah.
but it was still interesting. A lot of mental health issues you could see in there, but also like issues with steroid use and scamming, with wellness sort of scammers that are out there, things like that. So,
Yeah.
So it did tie in with some of our stuff that we've talked about before, but it was crazy. Like I did not expect some of the stuff that I saw in there. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and call out our patrons. We have a couple of new ones this week, so I do want to give you guys shout outs. We have Nicole Crane, Brett Moser, Lynn Rocket, Ogre the Viking, Maggie's Yarm, Maya Showstock, Sasha Rubel, Nicole Rivers, Woolly Wolf NZ, Liz Bianchini, Dixie Painter, James Mills, Bobby Sue, Amanda B., Mara Santiago, Grace Lahan, Genevieve, Neve Shatrit, Jay Went, Inken Hafner, Kiri Yorsek, Kate Lininen, Robert Jr., Jessica Gasparini, Soy Kasumi, Thomas Huff, Glow and Go, Julia Franzoni, Lady Digitalis, Leah Marie Matson, Ebby, Supergirl Sway, Creative Otter, Dizzy Dancer, Mr. Slave, The Warped Witch, Dalek Party, Jennifer Ramirez Johnson, Desiree Davis, Melissa Emmel, Lynn Simpson, Aaron Carey, Crystal Arden. Wow. I said Crystal and I read Kristen at the same time. Thank you.
Yep.
Kristen Arnold, Raynell Alara, Omadi, Bonnie, Christian Skretegard, Prim Risen, Stuart Slattery, Minnesota SPT, Pungrammed 101, Caitlin Martin, Wendy Goldstone, Too Fidgety, Jennifer Wilson Richter, Old Man Clyde, Anna Maria, Vix, Blau Frosh, Morgan Brittenham, Christine Moljati, Pterosaurus Hex, Estar, Knitting Ninja, Sarah G, Jefferson Vargas, Donna Lanchinazy, Lauren Smith, Banana, Serpentine Fire, Melanie the SLP, Stuart Lee, Chris Milanak, Libby, Heidi, Hansapalooza, Lisa MN, aka Schmutz, Kelsey H, Paper Sky, Hannah Cook, Cabasar, Britt Clark, Paris Longer, Andrea Shameless Agitator, Ruby Salazar, Cassandra Smiles, Daniel Soar, Jasmine, Dr. Doom, Maureen Hart, Justin Higgins, Nigel Hawkins, Judy Lowe, Seamus Pict, Lisa D.W., Lashia Paris, Jesse Pollard, Sarah, Jahira, Everyday Delirium, April, Alicia, Mela Fantastico, Panna Cannoli. Did I say Panna?
It sounded like that.
Panda Cannoli, like the critter, the cute little critter. Panda Cannoli, Amber Golder, Donna Foley, Michelle Cornett, Teeth Weir 5, Natsamaya Terrin, Tater the Gator, Hannah Rose, Sherlock and Watson, Ragdoll Cats, Nozamiko, Michelle with the 1L, Catherine, Gottabed Frazier, Brittany, Lisa Fagan, Haplo84, Anne Kittlong Will, aka Dubs, Eduna XXX, Megan Geiger, Elian Golding, Lucy Galloway, Toby Marie, Shelby Knowles, Catherine Smith, Aussie Sapper 92, and Sarah Weeks. So we've got a couple of new ones there. Thank you guys so much for supporting the podcast, and for all of you just for listening and being here with us today, and tolerating our chaos. So yeah, we have some stuff to go into with J&J, some more stuff maybe in the next episode too, because oh my gosh,
we found more.
There was just some stuff that I was like, I have to mention this.
Mm-hmm.
Like it feels negligent not to mention this. So yeah, we're going to go over kind of the end of the whole talc situation we talked about last time, what was going on there. And then we've got some like medications that they started developing. Obviously they got into the pharmaceutical type stuff pretty early on too. So we really need to talk about that, and just some stuff that they did that was not nice.
Mm-hmm.
So, and some things they didn't do that they should have done.
Yeah.
So we left off, I think, with, let's see, they were doing a lot of research, study here, study there on this talc that was in the baby powder they were selling, talc in general from baby powders and things like that, not just from their company, but I think Engelhard was another company. And Engelhard had actually bought one of their mines where they were getting talc from. And it was found that this particular mine was just covered with asbestos, right? And the talc coming from there was contaminated with asbestos. And J&J had said all along, no, we don't have any asbestos in our like stuff. Like it's all safe, it's fine. Even though they had admitted to like certain agencies, like, yeah, but it's like a little bit. So it doesn't do anything bad to anybody. Enough. But we know that asbestos in even tiny amounts can really hurt people. So anyway, so we mentioned Glenn Hemstock. That was Engelhard's research director. At the time, he was the one that was like, yep, definitely some asbestos in here. Definitely. Like wasn't trying to hide anything, which go him, right? But he went on to give a deposition in a lawsuit against Engelhard, which was filed by a worker for a tire company that was using their talc powder. They were probably rubbing it on things, like they do with balloons and stuff like that for kids. Gotcha. Or gloves. They were using it for gloves at one point too, and then they use something different. But yeah, this worker was literally dying of mesothelioma because of the talc that he was exposed to at this time. And this deposition was not only a hit on Engelhard, but also on Johnson & Johnson, because the mine from which Engelhard was getting that talc used to belong to J&J. And it's not like it just all of a sudden became contaminated. Right. Like it's always been contaminated. They just lied about it. So both companies ended up paying an undisclosed sum to settle the case, with the added demand for confidentiality and, wow, I said that word just crazy, confidentiality, and the return of all evidence against them. So, yeah, we'll settle, but you got to give us everything you have on us back to us.
Right.
And also don't tell anybody. It just feels okay. So this evidence was subsequently and intentionally destroyed, if you can imagine. Most of it. They didn't get all of it. J&J even substituted damning records with false ones to keep claiming that there was no asbestos in the talc. Like they were literally just making up stuff and putting it in these records. It wasn't even real. It was lies, which I feel like they should have gotten into a lot of trouble for when this was eventually found out. But it's like, okay. Now, the thing is, you can't make facts disappear, no matter how hard you try. Right. Now, by the 1900s, by the 1990s, we've been in the 1900s for a while, other companies in the talc business were switching to cornstarch because it was safer. You know, it worked. It was safer. They switched to it. But J&J didn't want to do that. They were like, no, because if we admit to doing that, then we will have to admit that we've been like lying all along and like our products weren't safe. And then like all the trust in our products will be gone. Like they kept on this road of, we're not going to do that.
Just digging a hole.
Yeah. Like digging the hole even deeper. It was bad.
Yep.
Anyway, so various health agencies analyzing ingredients of various products informed the company they would need to add a label to their products stating they could lead to cancer. Then the company executives were like, no, we don't want to do that. Now, reporters also started poking for the truth and, you know, that they could make quite a story with, to be honest. And if, you know, you've got reporters in on it, like they're better about getting it out to the public. They're not going to be as dodgy as, say, some agencies that are like, well, we'll give you like 3 months to figure this out and then forget about it. Right? Now, the FDA at this point were just making excuses, in my opinion. They claimed they didn't have the budget to look into this issue anymore. And that sounds like a cop-out to me. Now, there are times where we talk about the FDA where it's like they really didn't have any money because they get their money from the government. And it depends on who's basically running things, whether it's whatever administration is running things, what they think that budget should be. Right. So that's kind of where they get their budget from. So sometimes it's better. Sometimes it's worse. It's whatever. Yeah. So maybe they didn't have a whole lot of money, but it just like they weren't saying anything about what they already knew either. You know, in 2009, Donna Paduano, who was a sufferer of mesothelioma, sued Engelhard as well. She used to do homework in her father's lab, who worked for them. And she ended up with this disease just because she was in proximity to it. Now, Engelhard claimed that there had never been any asbestos found in any of their labs, mines, or talc, which is a lie because they already had this conversation about it being in the mines and the talc. But, you know, they had that, all of that evidence had been, you know, taken.
Swept under the rug.
Right. And they tried to destroy it all and everything. Yeah. And they started citing those false documents that Johnson & Johnson had created after that case that they had settled, you know, together. Thinking like, oh, well, they're not going to find out. However, Glenn Hemstock, who had provided the damning deposition for that lawsuit before, he was still alive. And his deposition had survived. So I'm not sure what they were thinking. Like he would just disappear. He not only sat again for a new deposition, but expressed his anger over the fact that both companies had been lying all this time still. Yeah.
And getting away with it.
Yeah. And, you know, he's this respected, you know, researcher.
Right.
Then more and more evidence against both Engelhard and J&J came out. Lawyers began requesting and subpoenaing, wow, I can't say that word, they subpoenaed documents from J&J, finding legit reports that had not been purged along with the other stuff. Like they had forgotten some stuff, they had left out some stuff. They can't even do that, right? Okay. Now it was also confirmed that a New York law firm that had represented Engelhard and J&J before had lied on their behalf. They ended up having to pay this $75 million settlement because it was found out that they lied about this, right? And this evolved into a whole other case known as the Ingham trial against J&J, representing 22 women diagnosed with ovarian cancer taken up by this really great lawyer, honestly, who he just burned the company's representatives. I mean, this guy was on fire.
Yeah.
It was great to read, honestly. And also their chief medical officer and their talc safety expert. Like, you have a talc safety expert, but it's not safe.
Mhm.
The latter, this expert, stated that she had used the product itself and, it was all around her growing up. When asking how her mother was doing, she had to admit that her mother had passed away at 63 from ovarian cancer. Now, it was noted quickly by the victim's lawyer that Johnson & Johnson had not brought a single medical expert who studied the health effects of asbestos, even though there are plenty of experts in that field to be found at this point.
Right.
Like, they were just bringing up anybody that had, like, I don't know, doctor in their name or had worked in a lab before, but like they hadn't worked with this specific stuff.
Right.
And they were paying them, right? So now, in the end, he made sure to add, talcum powder works no better than cornstarch. Their documents say it. Their studies say it. The profit margin just isn't as high. So it's like, dang. Yeah, I mean, he just said it. He just came out and said it. Now, in the end, all 12 jurors agreed that Johnson & Johnson was liable and had to pay plaintiffs $25 million each in compensatory damages, a total of $550 million. They were also liable for punitive damages, which later came out to be $4.14 billion. And of course, Johnson & Johnson tried to appeal. They went all the way to the Supreme Court, who denied to hear their case further. They were like, no, that sounds about right. No, we're not doing this.
Yeah.
They also tried to keep the news from, like, getting out into the press and to the public, but ultimately they failed, because after a while, it's like, especially with, how much technology has evolved too, like, it's going to get out eventually, right?
Yeah.
Now, a flood of lawsuits came after this, including one filed by Dr. Richard Pazder. Now, he's literally one of the most influential oncologists in modern history. I mean, this is Johnson & Johnson's worst enemy, like, worst person that they could deal with. Like, he knows oncology. He knows cancer. His wife had died from ovarian cancer. She was a nurse who had used baby powder extensively. So finally, the FDA decided to step up and do their own testing. And in 2019, they announced their findings of the baby powder talc being positive for chrysotile asbestos. Who'd have thunk? They had not yet told the public, though. Now, there are apparently notes from the meetings of J&J officials after this private announcement that the FDA gave to them about it. And literally some of these notes involved possible routes to take at this point. Like, some of them referenced blackmail. Some of them referenced the possibility of coercion. Like, they're trying. Now, 4 days after telling Johnson & Johnson, the FDA finally announced to the public the findings of asbestos in the Johnson & Johnson's baby powder, and advised anyone with it to not use it. Like, if they had done this years ago, though, imagine, like, the women who would not have come down with cancer or died of it, right? So Johnson & Johnson still tried to fight and claim that the FDA's tests were wrong. Like, theirs are wrong. Now, 7 months into this fight, though, in May of 2020,
Real recently.
Yeah, they announced that they had stopped the sale of talc-based baby powders in the US and Canada, saying it was because of the misinformation about it being unsafe.
Okay.
Sure. Now, obviously, Johnson & Johnson wasn't just making money off baby powder, even if that was their, cash cow for the longest.
Yeah.
By the 1960s, Johnson & Johnson was also researching and making over-the-counter and prescription medications. Now, as I mentioned last week, they acquired a few different labs and companies, notably McNeil Laboratories and then Janssen Pharmaceuticals. McNeil they had made aspirin way back in the day. Janssen was known for, like, Haldol and fentanyl. I think he was the maker of fentanyl.
Yeah.
But they started selling Tylenol around 1960. They did develop the Rogam vaccine, which is given to pregnant mothers who are RHD negative. in cases where the fetus may be RHD positive.
Right.
So like Rh positive, negative, it's like an identifier for whether or not you have that rhesus factor or this genetic protein that's found on the surface of red blood cells. So during, say, a first pregnancy, like small amounts of fetal blood cells can sometimes enter the mother's bloodstream.
Right.
Like, yeah, you have like the placenta where like things are usually like the transfer of nutrients and all that is. But sometimes, whether it's in the like if there's some sort of injury or if there's even during the labor process, like sometimes these cells can actually, the fetal cells can go into the mother's bloodstream. And once the fetal Rh positive red blood cells enter the bloodstream of an Rh negative mother, like depending on if they have Rh positive or whatever.
Yeah.
But if that were to happen, they're recognized as foreign within the mother, right? So the mother's body treats these foreign cells as it would a virus or infection of any sort. It creates antibodies. So in subsequent pregnancies, these antibodies can actually travel across the placenta. And if this next baby is also Rh positive, it can attack fetal Rh positive cells.
Right.
It's going to try to attack it, get it out of the body.
Yeah.
It sees it as something that's not good for the body. So, yeah. So if the next baby is also Rh positive, these antibodies from that first pregnancy can go after those cells. And this can lead to something called erythroblastosis fetalis in the fetus or the baby. It can actually result in death if it's not, taken care of. It's more complex, but I don't have time to discuss it with this other topic. So just kind of brief, idea of what it is. But that's what the RhoGAM vaccine prevents. It's actually pretty big deal. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So they had a
It
pretty
does some good stuff.
Yeah, like it's a good medication or vaccine. Now they had a pretty big leap into pharmaceuticals. They were wildly successful with all of this. And there were some major issues though that were made worse by just a surprising lack of morals and propensity for greed. And you have to remember too, like the people coming up with these drugs and stuff, they're the researchers within these companies. And then you have people like top officials, executives, all these other people making decisions about how it's going to be sold and how it's going to be marketed and all this other stuff, right?
Yeah.
So some major issues we do need to mention and discuss are these. And these are in the form of facts and dates that I kind of want to be sure to mention, but also not let my brain get carried off with, because I don't want to stray.
Don't want to go on a tangent.
Yeah.
Not yet.
So, for one, aspirin was first made by a chemist working for Bayer in 1897 for, by synthesizing acetylsalicylic acid. It was already known by some that salicin found in like willow tree bark was actually a good antipyretic and pain reliever. Like it had been used in like home medicines by different cultures for some time. And then penicillin was later discovered, made, by Alexander Fleming, 1928, made useful in medicine as an antibiotic closer to the 1940s, around that time. Which is interesting because my grandfather, he was in World War II. He was in the Navy. While he was overseas, he ended up with tuberculosis. And it was at that point that they actually had something to treat tuberculosis with. And he was like, you're so lucky because we now have this new medication. So that's fun. Now, after the creation of Tylenol and its marketing and sale by, Johnson & Johnson, Janssen, the creation of new drugs just blew up. I mean, it was like, we need to make more. We need to make more. We need to make more. Now, some of these medicines were really good. Some weren't good at all. Some were actually dangerous, but they all had something in common. They brought in gobs of money for the companies making them, right? They could find a way to sell them, raise prices over time. They could make tons and tons of money. While there was some form of health insurance in the early 1900s that evolved over time, mind you, it was not until during World War II and after, like in the 1940s, that employers began to offer health insurance plans. Now, the federal government had placed strict limits on wages at the time, likely to do with the expense of war and all this other stuff. And businesses began to use this idea of adding in health insurance as incentives for like coming to work for them.
Right.
So it's like, yeah, we can't really offer any higher prices or higher wages, but we can get you health insurance, right? Which is, a big deal even today, even though health insurance has kind of gone downhill because they don't want to pay for anything, right?
Even though we're paying them all this money to do it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like a lot of people that want to, sit there and argue that you don't need this. They're just like
they're not even doctors.
Yeah, they don't have any healthcare
background
experience. It's like, Oh, yeah. It's
Yeah.
it's infuriating.
Mhm.
Doctors are mad about it too. I mean, it's just
Doctors shouldn't have to fight an insurance company for your health. Like,
yeah, they're already like busy with other stuff too,
exactly.
and it's like they literally have to step away from surgeries sometimes to argue why the patient needs surgery.
Mhm.
It's ridiculous. Anyway, hopefully something happens with that.
Yeah.
But yeah. So obviously this is important for the world of medicine for obvious reasons, especially at this time when healthcare may have even been cheaper at this point, but it's not like people were making a lot either. So
Mhm.
it's still expensive to them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Let's see. But it's also relevant because this made prescription medications just increasingly profitable.
Mhm.
Okay. This only increased with the setup of like Medicaid and Medicare programs beginning in the 1960s, which, they paid for medications at first only during hospital stays, but then later they would start covering all meds even outside of hospital stays. And other insurance plans kind of followed this path as well. Now, because insurance companies were paying the cost of these prescription meds, the drug companies started just, raising the cost up like pretty a lot,
Yeah.
over time. While over the counter meds, they would still, raise in price, but not as much at a time.
Yeah.
So this is why so many prescription meds will cost a ton of money, especially when looked at outside insurance, at least.
Mhm.
While over the counter meds remain a more affordable price. So, like I said, they're also becoming less affordable, if you ask me. This is also why some pharmaceutical companies will fight to keep their drugs prescription only, because they can get more money for each tablet or capsule sold if they do it that way. Now,
Yeah.
yeah, the FDA marked Allegra and Claritin, for instance, as safe for over-the-counter use. But when they first came out, they were prescription only for a while. These two are actually known for being safer than Benadryl, which is over-the-counter.
Yeah.
So it's like they really wanted to keep them prescription because they can make more money off of them if they did it that way. Charge the insurance companies a lot of money, but if you give them out to the public, they're not going to sell very well if they're that expensive.
Mhm.
So now, knowing these things and the fact that Tylenol was released as over-the-counter, and remains as such, it is no surprise that Johnson & Johnson was really quick to start researching and creating more and more drugs, right?
Right.
As other drug companies were doing too. It's not just them. Now, Tylenol would remain its price and availability, but they needed some new drugs to sell for these higher prices if they were going to stay profitable. So the concept of new and more just trickled down into marketing as well, and this new age of sales reps for drug companies emerged. Before you had, people in suits going to explain like what drugs did and all this other stuff and
Right.
just talk with doctors. And now there's this like new look and personality that you have to have for this sort of sales rep job, just attractive and perky and over friendly, like flirty even.
Yeah.
And so many sales reps brought along gifts, food, favors, even straight up money, for doctors that they could convince to prescribe their drugs and bring more money to their company, right?
Mhm.
They're like, literally trying to persuade these doctors like, hey, you prescribe this. And doctors in this era were actually dealing with a lot of changes themselves. So this looked great to them, right? This was like, oh my God, somebody appreciates me.
Yeah.
Right. Um, and honestly, some of the changes that were happening put a dent in doctors' salaries. There came a time where whether you were good or bad as a doctor, you kind of got paid around the same thing. So,
Right.
so you couldn't really be a better doctor and get rewarded for it, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
Also, their ability to make clinical decisions or retain this ability, to use their expertise in healthcare was being stripped from them, especially with insurance companies being like, no, you need to do this. And it's like, even though they have no clue what they're talking about, medically speaking, they're basically micromanaging, these doctors and healthcare and all that. So now politics, CEOs of hospitals, health insurances, pharmaceutical companies basically just started telling them how to do their jobs, And so now you've got this dangling of appreciation and like, here's a little add to your salary, you can just kind of a little extra income, like this is what they're kind of, I
Mhm.
guess, reckoning it with, which still wrong, obviously, for obvious
Yeah.
reasons. But at this point, it just wasn't seen as a big deal until obviously it was.
Right.
So now you've got a sales rep coming along, complimenting them, giving them gifts, money. They ate it up. And it wasn't just J&J doing this. Merck gave out free manuals. Eli Lilly gave these leather bags to doctors. All at some point gave cash. In the 1980s, these companies were able to use a database of doctors' prescription records to compare habits between those receiving gifts and those not. Like they were able to go back and look and see how this went. And they discovered that when it came to giving doctors cash, there was a $3.50 to $5 increase in their drug sales, which seems tiny until you realize
how big of a scale it
is.
Yeah.
Now, this was a better investment for them than having more labs and scientists even. So they literally just started to phase out actual chemists and drug experts.
Yeah.
Literally phasing out the experts who would test things.
But also make more things for them. So it's kind of like, why?
Yeah. And so they would keep a few people to make things. And then instead of keeping experts that would say this is safe, this is not safe, that kind of thing, they would literally hire more enthusiastic yet typically uneducated salespeople to just sell these drugs. And there are actual studies that have shown that sales reps like these make doctors worse at their jobs.
Yeah.
Go figure.
Yeah.
Now, these reps also started to give things like food services, gift cards for shopping sprees, like back to school shopping things and all this other stuff, and even gas money. And some of the stuff may seem like it's harmless at first until you realize what they're doing. It's like they're literally trying to bribe you, right?
Right.
That's basically what it is, whether they want to call it that or not. And doctors then, and some even now, would defend these prizes, if you will, as helping to support their jobs and families, since their own salaries and authority over care were subject to various limits put on them by these workers who had no business butting in anyway. But it's still you have to be somehow justifying a way to say that these aren't bribes. You know what I mean? Because over time, it became if you weren't actively pushing some of these medications, those companies stopped giving these gifts to you. So it was kind of a bribe, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Most people do think of doctors as these wealthy individuals with these vast opportunities and connections. And some do, mainly the ones who are born into households with it already, or those taking deals they shouldn't be.
Right.
Like we're talking about. Most of them these days are actually in student debt. They're overworked, burned out, depressed. People envision doctors as these they own mansions and stuff. I'm like, well, yeah, the older ones do, the much older ones, and usually the ones that kind of their dads were also doctors and their granddads were doctors.
Right.
A lot of the ones who just get into it, the amount of student debt they have to pay back, good Lord. Anyway,
too much.
Yeah, and it's it's a lot. I couldn't be a doctor. But you do have those that attain celebrity status, or whatever. But they're also selling a personality too. I mean, kind of the Dr. Oz's, or you see a lot of them in the cosmetics type field too, those kinds of things. So there are probably doctors that are making more money on social media these days, honestly.
Oh, probably.
Than at their regular jobs. It's insane. Because I used to know nurses that would make more money working in the bars during Masters Week here in Augusta than they ever made in a week at work. And it was literally more profitable for them to take off that week and go work as bartenders.
Dang.
Than to come back to their nursing jobs.
It's pretty bad.
So, yeah. Now, some still do this, obviously. It is expressly illegal to do so. When it comes to taking, they call it anti-kickback, rules now, that kind of thing. So it is illegal to take favors and stuff like that these days.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk about that in a minute. But there's also money in politics, and pharmaceutical companies are actually known for being the biggest financial supporters of political candidates.
They got the money.
And it's why? Because who controls the FDA, right? The government or any other regulatory agency, really. If you can get an in that respect, you can get your drugs passed through. You know what I mean? So it's really, I hate the fact that it's connected in such a way that it can be corrupted like that, because it really can.
I think it's pretty bad that you have to sit there and try and sell your drug to the doctors, but also through all the ads that we see on TV every day. It's why can't your medicine speak for itself?
Yeah. Well, and we're going to talk about that too, because they started coming out with these different ads and stuff once, some of these other things kicked in and they weren't allowed to really sell to doctors anymore. I wish they still try, but yeah. Now, so we asked last week, like, where does the corruption lie? And it's basically where money can lead all the decisions being made.
Yep.
Right. Like, why do we have insurance companies also owning hospitals?
Yeah.
And pharmaceutical companies. So you can only get medications through them. It just feels
very monopolized.
Awful. Yeah, it feels awful. But you also have like the government, depending on where the sway is, like saying what goes and what doesn't go for the FDA, the EPA and stuff like that. And they're getting paid money by these pharmaceutical companies, but that's not considered kickbacks.
Yeah. Like, where's the line?
You know what I mean? Like, how come they get paid millions of dollars, these political candidates and campaigns and stuff, basically to do what they lobbying, what they want them to lobby. It's a lot, but it's like they don't really get in trouble for that.
Unfortunately.
Anyway, it's a lot. But as medicines for genetic disorders and cancers and other possibly or definitely terminal diseases, made their appearance on the market, even treatments for like genetic things that you could pass on to your children, like they could be treated before you even have children. Like there's a lot of crazy new treatments and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But as those started to appear on the market, prices rose even more, as you can imagine. Like think of cancer treatments that are way more expensive than they should be. Life-saving EpiPens for kids who have peanut allergies. They're so expensive. They should not be that expensive. No. Insulin, right?
Yeah.
Just the guy who made insulin gave away the patent.
Yeah.
With the hopes that anybody would be able to have it and use it.
Yeah.
And instead, like, they've made it into a business. Anyway. Unfortunately. There are some treatments that can cost up to millions of dollars. It's insane. It's insane. It's cruel. It's villainous. And those in charge of such decisions should be ashamed of themselves.
Yep.
It'll come back to get them in the long run. Now, the good news is that not all doctors are okay with being bought. There are many researchers, medical or otherwise, that are downright offended at the notion. And I do love that for them. I mean that sincerely. Like,
keep up the good work.
Love it that they do that.
Yeah.
And over time, more and more doctors, though not all, statistically express their discomfort with taking cash or obvious gifts like before. And of course, like I said, it does also become illegal. And we'll talk a little bit more about that particular act that made it illegal in just a second.
Yeah.
And we'll talk more about some researchers when we talk about some specific medications that were revealed to have some awful issues with them, so that I don't confuse people by just throwing names out.
Yeah.
But one wrench thrown into the pharmaceutical business's money-making schemes involved the allowance since 1984 for small companies to make cheaper generic forms of these like higher-priced medications being sold. Now we can get like the generic of such and such or whatever. They had to wait for like patents to expire, of course, but since the formulas were the same or basically the same, these drugs only required a few tests, which is much cheaper and faster than, say, like years of study that you have to put them through.
Yeah.
So this, of course, motivated big-time drug companies like J&J to make more and more medicines, right? And so we see all these commercials, they're here in the U.S. and apparently also in New Zealand. They can do this for some reason. And it promotes these newer drugs. And I think we were talking just yesterday about some of the names of these drugs. Like I did a lot with like pharmacology and when I was working in nursing, and I've never heard of these drugs.
Yeah.
Like these new like you see them all over like the streaming services. And it's like you trying to watch something and every single ad that comes on has to do with some sort of medication that I've never heard of before.
Right.
And then it's like a list of just things that if you notice these things, maybe talk to your doctor and also ask your doctor to give you this. And I'm like, this is another part of basically other people trying to do doctors' jobs for them, right? Like, don't let the doctor give you advice or actually treat you. Go and ask for this medication.
Right.
And just tell them to give it to you. Right? Yeah. So anyway.
Stepping on toes.
And it's not that every single one of these medications is bad. It's just like they are like really pushing it through these ads.
Yeah.
Right? And it's kind of weird.
Excessively so.
It's kind of weird. if my doctor thinks I need this,
they'd suggest it organically, not
right,
not because you're like, oh, I saw this ad.
Yeah, and if y'all would, I don't know, leave them alone, maybe they'd have time to read updated research on what medicines work best for things.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
And make informed decisions for their patients.
Yeah. So maybe if y'all stop taking all this time away from them, I don't know. There's so many things that changed around the same time that all this other stuff came out.
Yeah.
It's insane. Now, and of course, there are some doctors that, there are good doctors, there are bad doctors. There's some doctors that honestly are like, heck yeah, I'm going to make some extra income selling these drugs. So like, there are some bad ones out there. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to like say, oh, all doctors are, great and it's not their fault. I feel like for the most part, a lot of doctors do go into it for the right reasons, because the thing is, it's hard. It's a hard job. It's hard to just get there. Once insurance agencies started only covering they started covering the cheaper generic options, for obvious reasons. They're like, well, if we're going to, why cover the more expensive one when it does the same thing? They started advertising these drugs as useful for things they weren't necessarily made for, alongside their actual purpose.
Yeah.
Right? So they pushed boundaries concerning laws that kept them from telling doctors to prescribe medications that do not help patients or could even hurt them. They also started this sort of campaign of like treating the symptoms of things, like treat to the symptoms. And basically the sales reps would ask doctors if they had any patients experiencing symptoms like anxiety, headache, fatigue, just vague symptoms that could
be anything.
Yeah. They might even be just a series of bad weeks you've been having. It could
maybe you slept funny,
or an illness that has nothing to do with this particular medicine they're selling.
Right.
So they would encourage doctors to just have patients with these vague symptoms try these new medications, saying like this will help this and this will help that. It's just a way to sell new medicines, basically. And just for clarity, again, it is illegal to offer kickbacks for prescriptions. It's not actually allowed to pay. They're not actually allowed to pay doctors to give these drugs to people legally. I'm not saying that there's no doctors today that do this. I definitely have seen articles where doctors have gotten in some major trouble for doing this kind of thing. But that's the thing. They're supposed to they get in trouble for it. It's illegal. It's actually a felony. Drug companies may offer opportunities to doctors to speak or write about a medication that they have prescribed to their patients. So sometimes in a sneaky sort of way, they're like, well, they have to prescribe it a lot in order to know about it, right? And then so if they prescribe it a lot, then we'll give them opportunities to speak on it. And this gives them more prestige, and maybe they get paid for speaking on this specific topic or something. So there's some underhanded stuff that they try to do. There's these loopholes that conveniently work out for the drug makers. But believe it or not, doctors could actually make a lot more money working for these drug companies than at their practices, sadly. So some do fall for it. So what did the FDA do about any of this? Again, it depends on the political peeps in power at the time.
Right.
Right. Because they're making money too. There were advisory meetings and requests made of pharmaceutical companies with no real follow-up. In some cases, the director of the FDA was working with these companies as well. For a time, as we mentioned last week, the FDA didn't have much power at all, except for minor investigation and giving advice. They didn't really get power to do much until a little bit later. When they did gain power, there were other reasons they could not or would not act. During the 1980s, for instance, when the Tylenol murders occurred, the cyanide and the Tylenol capsules up there in Chicago.
Yeah.
They just ran out of money around the same time. They literally didn't have the funds to do a proper investigation. The book I read on J&J actually stated that the pharmaceutical company industries are the biggest donors to American political campaigns. And I did look this up because I was unsure if the author meant for most previous elections or if this had been a long time trend.
Right.
But it does seem like they have consistently been one of the largest donors, for sure, alongside oil and gas companies, law firms, air transport, real estate, and securities and investment industries, which is telling. And in 2025, when this book was released, a non-election year, health industries like Johnson & Johnson spent over $224 million towards political interests.
Jeez.
So, and according to the National Institute for Health website, this may be a way for such companies to counteract any efforts to lower drug costs and other legislation to regulate drugs. So paying them off to not put restrictions on them raising costs of drugs, if you will. So it's not just doctors, they were and are trying to woo, but politicians who could stop them from overcharging and overselling their medications as well.
Yeah.
And, I mentioned how illegal it is for doctors to receive kickbacks from these companies. This started back in 1972. There was a federal anti-kickback statute that was put into place. And it's been strengthened over time, updated. The wording and penalties have been updated, for violating it. Now, a kickback in healthcare is defined in that act as a remuneration, to induce or reward referrals or business that will ultimately be paid for by a federal healthcare program. Remuneration can be for any healthcare service, drug, or medical equipment, and not only includes remunerations offered to or accepted by healthcare providers, but also incentives offered to patients to use a specific healthcare service. Such rewards or incentives can be cash payments, but also anything of value, such as free rent, expensive hotel stays and meals, and excessive compensation for medical directorships and consultancies. Other publications suggest remuneration can also include sports tickets, gift cards, and stock options.
Mm-hmm.
Now, effectively, any benefit offered as an inducement or reward could be considered a kickback in healthcare. Now, this is a criminal law. It's a felony, and anyone caught offering, allowing, or accepting such kickbacks may receive massive fines and jail time depending on the circumstances, right? And there are a list of exceptions in the act that pertain to things like investment interest or space rental, sale of practice, things kind of outside medication, thing like that.
Yeah.
So they're more like language specification than exceptions, if you think about it. Still, there are those who are dumb enough to try to break the law, or those who don't know that.
The laws.
Yeah, or those who don't know that accepting free free hotel stay for speaking on a drug would be considered, this would be
Really?
considered illegal. They're not supposed to do that. If they speak on a drug, it's supposed to be on their own time. They go and do it themselves. They get invited to do it, but it's more for their maybe prestige benefit or experience benefit.
Right.
It's not supposed to be paid for, or they're not supposed to pay them for it. So there's some that maybe they should know, but maybe they don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
They should. So I wanted to break down a few medications put out by Johnson & Johnson that have resulted in much of their secrets and sins being revealed. And we're only going to go really over one today.
Okay.
Because, yeah.
Because there's so many.
And we're going to go over Tylenol, which seems like such an innocent sort of drug. But then again, baby powder seemed innocent too.
True.
Now, Tylenol doesn't cause autism. Just going to get that out of the way. We're not talking about that. I'm only going to go a little bit into the Tylenol murders from the 1980s because we've already covered that in a prior episode. But I do want to mention that while Johnson & Johnson did appear to handle that situation in such a way that earned the public respect, they're like, oh, wow, they handled that so well. It was later discovered that they might have known something like this could happen and may have had faults in their medication distribution processes already that they could have fixed, and they just didn't. So Johnson & Johnson responded to these cyanide contamination reports with recalls and the introduction of those anti-tamper seals that we have today. And that actually caught on with other drug companies after the fact, of course. Now, there had been many previous complaints about Tylenol being tampered with in the past, and the company was able to act as fast as they had with these newest ones because they had actually previously considered anti-tamper packaging before. They had already been talking about it because of prior incidents, but it wasn't until this huge one that everybody was reading about in the news that they were like, crap, we better do this.
Yeah.
But what's sad is if they had done it before, we wouldn't have had that tragedy either, right?
Right.
It was pretty awful too. Now, behind the scenes, Johnson & Johnson executives also spent days arguing over whether or not to put out a full or limited recall on the medications, during the time of this cyanide poisoning going on, this tampering, even though copycat poisonings were already being reported, which included one in California where strychnine was the contaminant. And it's like they're basically just trying to copy what was going on in Chicago with the cyanide poisonings. And so they heard that these things were going on, but they were like, do we really need to recall all of it though? Because like that's going to cost us a lot of money,
Mhm.
you know? And so that just looks like, okay.
Yeah.
It was not until that incident became public that Johnson & Johnson decided on a full recall. They had no choice, like once everyone knew about it, right? It's
Right.
like if they don't do it this way, then they're gonna look like
Bad.
yeah.
Yeah.
So when it came to the distribution of the drugs to various pharmacies or stores, it was discovered that anyone could really breach that system. They could take boxes of medication, open it up, contaminate it with whatever, and then just stick it back on what would be like shelves,
Right.
and sold. When a backroom stock bottle of Tylenol was discovered to have been contaminated, it was confirmed that there may have been someone along the distribution line who did this, and not just some random person going into stores to mess with the ones on the shelves. So it could have been somebody down the line of distribution itself.
Yeah.
And like the way they were distributing it too, and the way they still distribute certain things is through like they'll sell to certain stores, but then they'll also sell to these like warehouses where
Right.
those people will take it to those certain stores, because it's just, I guess, easier.
Mhm.
And so there really wasn't much protection in between there either.
Yeah.
So whereas now, like with the anti-tamper packaging, if something's been tampered with.
Right.
So while Johnson & Johnson were not directly responsible for the poisonings, they were not exactly defending against such, even though there had been previous issues before. It just had never reached the public in that way. Now, it was around this time they were also lying about their talc issues in baby powder. Okay. And so the public viewed the company as not just blameless, but as honestly another victim in this whole thing.
Yeah.
Right. Like, oh, it's not their fault. Honestly, they're kind of a victim in this too because it's affecting their business. So trust in the company only grew. Right? They're like, oh, they're great. Now, the FDA was not very much involved in these poisonings, even though they had a criminal division by this point, simply because they were kept in the dark by J&J and their budget was nil by that point. That very year, it was 1982, Congress had failed to pass a budget in time to prevent a shutdown. That sounds familiar.
Yep.
Not much has changed. And without the funding or resources, the FDA surrendered responsibility of investigating/testing over to J&J themselves, who had every reason to hide how big this situation was. It's like, duh. What do you mean? You don't think people lie?
Yeah.
Ever? So there have since been reports released that prove that Johnson & Johnson also kept federal authorities in general in the dark, and that they knew the area of distribution that had been breached even before the deaths occurred. So they just had not said anything, hoping it would just go away. Right?
Right.
Now, another reason the FDA did not involve itself was because it had no legal authority to do so at the time. It was not until 1997 when they had authority to actually demand records or inspect documents at these companies. Like they could go in and ask, but they could be refused. Like, what's the point of that?
Yeah.
Now, the U.S. Government Accountability Office, just before the crisis, had concluded that the FDA had no ability to evaluate problems with over-the-counter drugs and did not know how many were marketed or whether they were safe or effective. And what's the point of them being there?
Yeah.
After the Tylenol murders, officials found that 300,000 different over-the-counter drug brands were marketed and billions of packages sold. And they admitted that these numbers were only estimates. So there was a reason why the FDA had no clue about previous contamination issues with the Tylenol. Now, this doesn't absolve the FDA or, of blame for any other issues. The commissioner of the FDA during this time, between 1981 and 83, Dr. Arthur Hayes Jr., was secretly and illegally taking money from drug companies, likely including J&J, while leading the agency. Most, if not all, FDA commissioners have worked for these companies after leaving the FDA, but Hayes was being paid by them during his role as commissioner. Honestly, the guy was a terrible person. Anyway, he served as captain in the U.S. Army Chemical Corps, where he once supervised experiments for the military of the effects of nitrogen mustard on the skin of at least 20 prisoners at Holmesburg State Prison. So human experimentation.
Yeah.
These experiments also involved Albert Kligman, who we talked about last week, who was injecting prisoners with baby powder, and the rabbits and the prisoners. You know, his messed up experiments. But they were also funded to some extent by Johnson & Johnson. Now, Hayes was introduced to President Ronald Reagan by Donald Rumsfeld, who at this time was the chief executive of G.D. Searle, which was a drug additive company, because he knew it would be beneficial to the industry if they had kind of a friend in there as commissioner, right?
Right.
And so the company was trying to get their new sweetener approved, which was aspartame at the time. Now, before his role in the drug company, Rumsfeld had actually been defense secretary to President Gerald Ford, and he would also be the same to George W. Bush when he became president later. So you can see the gross intertwining of the pharmaceutical company with politics.
Yeah.
And all of this likely did not come out until like Freedom of Information Act and stuff. So it's like nobody really knew what was going on that wasn't inside. Now, it was discovered during the Reagan presidency that Hayes was taking money illegally from drug companies. And so he retired to avoid the issue further, and he was never charged with anything, though he should have been.
As best should, probably.
Right, tracks. The U.S. attorney in Baltimore did write a letter stating that Hayes has shown an insensitivity to the principle that government employees must scrupulously avoid the appearance of impropriety in their dealings with the public. And I would say that that's light, honestly. And of course, Hayes was like, I was good at my job. I was honest. I was even a clergyman. Like, sir. Okay. Sit down.
Yeah.
So he actually went on to work for a public relations firm owned by a former top J&J executive, because of course he did. So one more issue with Tylenol that Johnson & Johnson hid from the public was its tendency to damage the liver. Now, when you think of Tylenol as a medication, like what normally comes to mind?
Pain relief.
Pain relief. It's been on the market forever.
Yep.
It's like literally everybody knows Tylenol. And they're like, that's like one of the safest medicines you can take. That's what people typically think, or they thought for the longest time. This is how Johnson & Johnson advertised it for a long time. Their most iconic advertisements claimed that Tylenol is the pain reliever that hospitals use the most. You know, it's the brand that doctors recommend the most. When it was introduced, it was shown to not affect the stomach lining as like some other pain relievers did. People were getting ulcers and stuff, and later it came out like, well, this is mostly because of H. pylori. It's that bacterial kind of thing going on with people. Once you treat it, the ulcer issues tend to go away, but those other pain relievers like ibuprofen or aspirin, those kinds of things would make it worse. It wasn't great for it either.
Right.
But Tylenol didn't do that. So people were like, this is great, right? And so the product began just making millions for the company. Then J&J applied to the FDA for extra strength Tylenol to be sold in 1975, which would give like 500 milligrams per pill as opposed to the original 325. And you can still buy like either or, honestly. Now, the dosing on the bottle says to take like 2 pills every 6 hours or 4 to 6 hours, right? Now, the ads and the packaging have long promised safe and fast pain relief. And I'm not sure how much weight advertising like this carries now. Like, honestly, ads just make me mad, right? Like you pay for the streaming service and it's like, ask your doctor to give you this medicine. It's like you see the same thing over and over.
And now I don't want to buy it.
No, I don't want to hear about it. I don't care.
Yeah.
Leave me alone. So like, I'm not sure like if it still carries as much weight. Maybe it does. And maybe it's just a few of us that are like, I hate these stupid ads.
Yeah.
But because all the political ads too, get a lot of political ads down here where it's like, such and such is a loser. Vote for me. Like that's basically what they're saying. And I'm like, what are we, 12? So stupid. Like I don't want to see those either. Anyway, moving on. This messaging was just the largest influence on those who would go on to develop liver failure because of taking too much Tylenol. So like it was working for a long time, right?
Yeah.
A survey of 46 patients treated for acetaminophen, which is the main ingredient of Tylenol, related liver damage at the University of Pennsylvania, found that the main reason patients had taken too much without even knowing the recommended dose was because they believed it was a safe medication. They were like, well, I mean, even if you take an extra one here or there, like they didn't think it was going to harm them. Now, over-the-counter meds, those without the need for prescription, carry this sort of myth that they're difficult to be injured by or die from. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
At least 150 Americans die every year, and at least 30,000 are hospitalized from taking too much acetaminophen. So Tylenol or an off-brand. These are just confirmed cases. They're only national numbers. That doesn't include worldwide.
Yeah.
When compared to other over-the-counter pain relievers, the death toll from all others combined is less than half that of acetaminophen. So it's been the nation's leading cause of acute liver failure for decades. Okay.
You won't feel it, though.
Yet many people still do not know this.
Sorry.
Well, a lot of times, like if they feel sick because of it, they'll think they're getting sick and they'll take cold meds, which also have Tylenol in them or acetaminophen in them.
Yep.
And so, you're just hurting it worse. But a lot of people don't know this. They still don't know this. Now, the company has known for decades, according to inside documents, that too much Tylenol or drinking alcohol with Tylenol was dangerous to the liver.
Mm-hmm.
But they still fought against safety or disclaimer labels for years because they didn't want scary language on their products because it would make sales go down, right?
Right.
Around the time that they were applying for that extra strength Tylenol to be marketed and sold, a British medical journal, The Lancet, which is a pretty important British medical journal, stated in an editorial that if acetaminophen were discovered today, it wouldn't be approved by British regulators because of its toxic effects on the liver. They went on to call the promises of the drug's safety deceptive, explaining that it would not take much more than the recommended max daily dosage to cause liver damage. And this isn't to, and also like just to mention, there are people who are more sensitive to it as well.
Right.
So like even less than the max dose would hurt them, right?
Yep.
And even they noted that acetaminophen was already one of the most common causes of liver failure in Britain at the time. So this is around the same time that they're looking for approval for their extra strength, version, which is just more acetaminophen, right? So the FDA did approve the use of extra strength Tylenol in 1976, and deaths from liver damage surged in the U.S. afterwards. Yeah.
Thanks.
In 1977, the FDA Advisory Committee suggested to the FDA, because there's a committee that advises them too, that the makers of Tylenol, Johnson & Johnson, should add a strong warning such as do not exceed recommended dosage because severe liver damage may occur. They're like, you need to put that on the bottle if you're going to do this. And the committee could only recommend, not make anyone do anything.
Right.
But they added that this should be mandatory based on the studies that they had seen. They wanted to make sure they knew that this was important.
Yeah.
Later that year, case studies of patients who suffered liver damage after taking acetaminophen for long periods or at slightly elevated doses were published in the Annals of Internal Medicine. J&J were not happy about this, of course. They wrote to the FDA that a liver warning was unnecessary. It would only confuse and frighten most of the public who used the medicine in a more rational way.
Yeah.
They claimed that overdoses were only the result of suicide attempts, which is not true. And that there were no documented cases of a person harmed by the medication being used for the right purposes, which was a complete lie. There was literally like case studies going around at this point that, yes, there were.
Yeah.
The FDA eventually sided with J&J, though, saying it didn't want to encourage suicides in case of those contemplating it by stating the damage that could be done by Tylenol. That's just wild and strange to me. Like, what?
I don't know.
Like, it's one thing to not report, like, the name of a poison and the dosage when you're talking about someone who committed suicide. I get that. But to not put a warning on a medication?
Yeah.
Okay. That just feels like an excuse of some sort. That's just weird.
Yeah.
They also said that the liver damage often showed up too late for a warning to be significant anyway. What?
Okay.
What? But if you warn the people, then maybe they won't do that, know? Anyway. So ads claiming Tylenol was the safest and most effective over-the-counter medication for pain on the market continued, and sales rose to a good $400 million within the next 2 years. And it only increased after that. The book that I read, it goes into a story, and the book's written by this reporter. He's a journalist that deals with pharmaceutical companies, the health industry, that kind of thing.
Is that the one we were talking about last time?
Yeah.
Okay.
The book does go into a story of this 23-year-old who hurt his wrist in 1995 for 2 weeks. He took Tylenol with codeine and he took extra strength Tylenol, not thinking anything of it, being too dangerous or whatever, or being too much. And he started to feel sick, which was actually a result of the meds. And so he started taking Theraflu, which also has acetaminophen in it.
Mm-hmm.
He was soon admitted to the hospital, fell into a coma, and he died 8 days later. His parents took him off life support.
Yeah.
8 days later.
Yikes.
The results of his autopsy showed that he died of liver failure from acetaminophen poisoning. Now, even today, Tylenol can be dangerous to those who don't realize, how much they're taking. Acetaminophen is in various combination meds, like cold meds. It's in pain relievers like oxycodone. So you can easily take cold meds and Tylenol, not realizing you're overdosing on acetaminophen. Also, drinking is still an issue that people do not consider much when taking it, because it's not about just drinking when you're taking it. It's, have you had a habit beforehand of drinking and now you're taking it? Because that also matters.
Mm-hmm.
So, like one earlier victim was a scheduler for President George H.W. Bush, who typically had 2 to 3 glasses of wine every night. He took Tylenol when he caught the flu in February of 1993. And he took it as recommended on the bottle and had not been drinking at all during his illness. Within a few days, he was in a coma due to liver failure and brain swelling.
Mm.
He ended up needing a liver transplant. He went on to sue Johnson & Johnson and won.
Yeah.
Now, today we may be like, well, yeah, you aren't supposed to drink even prior, like that and still take the meds. But this was not anywhere on the bottle,
Right.
or in the ads, even though Johnson & Johnson knew that it would lead to catastrophic liver failure. Like, they knew. They had case studies and everything.
Yeah.
They had test marketed back in 1986 how consumers would respond to different versions of an alcohol warning, and found that most would decrease or discontinue the use of Tylenol with a disclaimer attached. So they knew what would happen if they put it on there. They just didn't want to put it on there.
Right.
And they knew it was causing severe liver damage in drinkers, but they didn't want to do anything about it because they wanted to protect their cells. So further studies showed that alcoholics can suffer liver damage even after just moderate amounts of acetaminophen. And those studies came out like the next year. And then a year after that, a Swedish medical journal published a study on the dangers of mixing alcohol with acetaminophen. Instead of addressing the facts being put forth, McNeil's medical director sent a memo to Johnson & Johnson. And McNeil's one of the laboratories that they acquired. But sent a memo to the chief executive of just advising how to keep reporters from focusing on the issue and how to keep the public unaware of it all. Like, there's documents on the inside that are like, how do we keep this from getting out?
Mm-hmm.
So in 1993, another advisory committee told the FDA that there needed to be a warning. They're like, hey, there still needs to happen. And Johnson & Johnson still denied as much. But when asked again, Johnson & Johnson finally gave in and added the warning in 1994. Let's see, by 2011, the FDA limited prescription medicines to only include 325 milligrams of acetaminophen. So like those ones that you see that are in other pain relievers, they're only allowed to have that amount of acetaminophen and no more. And it also required that they carry a black box warning that acetaminophen has been associated with cases of acute liver failure resulting in liver transplant or death.
Mm-hmm.
Other countries like Britain, Switzerland, and New Zealand, they've put tougher restrictions on the drug, allowing only certain amounts to be bought at a time. And before we leave Tylenol here, we need to mention children's and infants Tylenol, because alongside the pill form for adults, there's long been a liquid version for children. Around 1957, the company put out this more concentrated liquid version for infants. Like, it's more concentrated. Like, it was supposedly more concentrated to limit the force of which parents needed to use to get into babies, right? So, like, you only need a little bit of this one because it's much more concentrated. But you could see that this would be risky for obvious reasons.
Right.
Because if you have a kid and you take the infant's Tylenol and you're like, it can't be that different, and you give them the kid dosage, that's way too much because it's so concentrated. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Between 2000 and 2009, the FDA received reports of 20 children dying from acetaminophen overdoses. And this number is likely less than the actual number. Some of these stem from the fact that parents didn't know the difference between children's and infants' Tylenol, or that the latter was more concentrated. They didn't even know. And for a long time, these versions did not have specific dosage instructions either. It literally just said, we'll ask your doctor how much to give them.
Yeah.
In 2009, an advisory panel for the FDA voted 36-1 in favor of the agency mandating there be one children's dose as opposed to these like children's and infants doses of different concentrations, so there's no confusion. Now, in these cases, Johnson & Johnson changed policies before the actual FDA even mandated anything. So the FDA didn't really even do anything really in these matters. It was more like the threatened laws of forcing Tylenol to be sold from behind a pharmacist's counter that would result in less sales that really did the trick for J&J, because they were going to lose money. Now, just to sort of touch on what we're going to talk about next week, another NED that we're going to go briefly into is it's called Procrit. It's basically synthetic EPO or erythropoietin. Okay, now this was introduced by Johnson & Johnson as a treatment for anemia, specifically in cancer patients as they underwent chemo and radiation. It could also be used for kidney patients going through dialysis.
Yeah.
Now, erythropoietin, it's a glycoprotein hormone. It stimulates the bone marrow to produce red blood cells. So, like if you're anemic and you have this hormone, it's going to say, "Hey, we need more blood cells." Tell the body we need more blood cells. So that's supposed to be helpful. Now, at the time, Procrit, which was the synthetic form of this protein, was being made in the 1980s. The only other option for those with anemia was blood transfusion. Okay.
Right.
And today, blood transfusions are safer. They're not perfect, mind you.
They do a lot more testing on everything.
Yeah, it's much rarer to catch anything from blood transfusions. Not saying it's perfect, but it is much more rare. But at the time that this was being made, blood unknowingly infected with HIV and AIDS led to thousands of others dying with the disease because it just wasn't being tested. It wasn't like it didn't have as much testing as it goes through today.
Yeah.
Now, the drug company Amgen found a way to make synthetic EPO, but had spent so much money in the process, they needed a partner to get it approved, to market it and to sell it, right? They spent so much money figuring out how to make it. And they're like, well, we need somebody to help us with the other parts. And that partner was Johnson & Johnson. And it was approved in 1988 and marketed to those suffering from anemia for cancer treatments and to kidney patients dealing with anemia from dialysis. And the next time we meet, I have some really dark stories to tell you about how well they hid some deadly effects of this drug and some other ones, a few others as well. So, but I wanted to just kind of introduce that a little bit. I know I talked a lot about Tylenol, but mainly because like Tylenol is this drug that's been around forever. Most people are like, it's like the safest drug ever. And there's still people that don't realize like you need to be careful with Tylenol, especially if you even drink in moderation. You need to be careful with Tylenol. That being said, be careful with Tylenol. Like it can cause some major liver issues if taken too often, taken too much. And I've known older people having worked in home health care. Like I've known people who would take the stuff like Skittles, like it was candy, thinking like, oh, I've got a headache. I'm just going to pop one in. And it's like, how many of those have you taken today? Right. And there are still people who go to the hospital for acute liver failure or liver, injury because of Tylenol. So, it's just good to know, but it's just really awful that they kept a lot of that secret for a long time while people were dying.
Right.
And next time we meet, we'll talk about some more, stories where they did the same while people died. So we're really, I think, jumping into some of these. We're really seeing how many skeletons they have in their closet at this point. I feel like, but that between that and like seeing just how much they have influenced, doctors and hospital CEOs, politics. It's messed up. So, but y'all let us know what you guys think. If you guys have any crazy stories that honestly align with this, because I know we've all had issues with healthcare at some point. Like whether it's through insurance companies, hospitals, medications, that kind of thing. But I look forward to bringing you more on erythropoietin and just at least one other drug. We're going to talk about some devices too that they came out with that, they were not so nice about. So, but thanks for listening, you guys. And we'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.
See ya.